What's going on, guys? It's Tyzilla83, and I want to thank you so much for stopping by and checking out the video. We're covering Final Fantasy 15 on this one, so if you would at the end, like, comment, share the content that you're watching. Of course, if you haven't already, feel free to tap that subscribe button down below. So just a heads up, letting you guys know, this is a first impressions video only. Definitely not a full review. I'm somewhere between 11 to about 13 hours of total time played. So all opinions are based on that amount of time that I've been able to put into Final Fantasy 15. So after many years of development, Final Fantasy 15 is released to the public from Square Enix. And I gotta say, they managed to do something I didn't think was possible, and that's make a Final Fantasy game for everybody. I mean, this truly is a game. I feel like if you've never played a Final Fantasy before, if you've never played an open world game before, if you've never played an RPG before, this might be a game worth checking out for you. This is, again, I think anybody could pick it up and have some fun with it. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be times you're going to have to bust out the, Google on your phone from time to time and and figure some things out. That's only natural, especially with Square Enix games or Final Fantasy games. But for the most part, it all just feels right. It all feels comfortable. You never feel completely out of place like I've heard some people talk about other older Final Fantasy games. You don't have that feeling here, I don't think. Moving on to the combat. Now, this is one area I feel like they dialed back on a little bit. I think they may have simplified the combat system a little too much, but I kind of like it. I like the way you could just pull up R2 on the PlayStation. You pull up R2 and there's your your health potions and everything you need there to keep your guys healthy and to keep up with your group, which is nice. But a lot of it is button mashing circle and every once in a while tapping square. Now, in my first 12 hours, maybe that's all I get in my first 12 hours. Not all that was spent on combat. So maybe later on, my second, or my next set of 12 hours will be different in the combat. But my first 12 hours was pretty simplified and a little bit repetitive. Not Shadow of Mordor repetitive, but, just a little combat repetitive for a Final Fantasy game. But not necessarily a bad thing either. Another thing I took away from the game, not necessarily a positive and not really a negative, but a little unbecoming of a Final Fantasy game, is that graphically things look good from far, but for the most part are far from good. What you expect from a Final Fantasy game at launch is their games typically look better than anything else out. They look like they're normally 2-3 years ahead of everybody else. Here, you could tell the game's been in a development cycle for a while. So 3 or 4 years ago, this might have looked okay. Even then, it may have just looked okay, but today it kind of looks behind at times. Don't get me wrong. There's things you can see from afar that look pretty. The color palette they use in combat or out of combat, they use, it's a nice set of colors. They're bright, they shine, and that for the most part they look good. But again, things sometimes just look good from far and far from good. That's not always the situation. Again, there are times where the game, especially the cutscenes, holy cow, they look really good. Very almost movie quality good. But that again, you expect from Square Enix. Another thing too that I want to say, and I would say this is probably pretty negative. They launched the game, and I learned this about a week ago. They launched the game without all the cutscenes intact, so they had to actually patch in some cutscenes. So if you were someone who played the game at launch and you hauled ass from week 1 to week 2 before they set out the patch that actually filled in the rest of the cutscenes and the rest of the story, you may have missed out on some story. That's a bad thing, and Square Enix needs to be held responsible for that. More and more, I wish this would have picked up and been something a little bit more newsworthy than what it was, but that's a little embarrassing. That should never be a thing. At launch, especially for such a story-driven game like Final Fantasy 15 is, that content should have been there at launch, and it wasn't. So shame on you, Square Enix. And the only other negative thing I'll say about the game is the voice acting. It's not horrible. Sometimes it's really fluid, and when they talk to one another, it's really neat during combat sometimes. Sometimes they kind of say the same thing over and over. But then you have times where you have someone in your group who just drives you insane. And, when you hear stuff like this, "Oh, man, yeah, wow, I want to ride my chocobo all day, yeah!" That shit drives me insane. Leave that out. Square Enix, that's horrible. Why would you put... Who did you hire for voice actors? That's awful. Who was in the booth with this guy? Like, hey, you know what? You don't sound enough like a Pokemon character yet. Let's ramp this shit up. Leave that out, please. But other than that, the game itself, the initial 13 hours, I've had fun with. I think you will too. If you want to, if you want me to make more content on this, comment down below, and I most certainly will. But so far, that's all I got. And maybe I'll update you guys just depending on the feedback I get here and how many views this video gets. Maybe I'll make some more content for you. So that's it for me. I want to thank you guys so much for checking out the video. If you enjoyed it, please slap a like on there. Comment down below if you've got any questions or comments. Feel free to share the content. Of course, if you haven't already, tap the subscribe button down below. Thanks a lot. Till the next video, you guys try like hell to be kind to one another. Peace!